You're listening to Reach, Teach, Talk with Nat Davey.
Welcome back to another episode of Reach, Teach, Talk. Today we're going to focus on boys and boys learning from the view of neuroscience and looking at boys' brains, how brains work, and how biologically boys' brains learn, how they communicate, how they connect. And it's a fascinating time to do this. We have learned so much since the pandemic, particularly. There just seems to be a flood of information about K-12 learning and healthy development for boys. And our guest today has been an expert, renowned global expert on boys and girls learning and healthy development for over 30 decades. And I'm just so excited to have with us today Dr. Michael Gurian, whose new book came out hot off the press just a few weeks ago, Boys, a Rescue Plan. And not only, the title alone, it's a rescue plan. And we're going to get into what is it about boys that needs rescuing, particularly today. But you can go back and listen to podcasts with Michael over the past 30 years, podcasts for the past 10, let's say, where this information, this research, this data still stands solidly and will. This is grounded data looking at boys' brains and what happens when their brains are fired up and what makes their brains fire up and why it is that boys biologically, what it is about the biological difference in boys' brains that makes teaching them so fascinating and so frustrating and sometimes enervating and sometimes just incredibly uplifting and incredible. So Dr. Michael Gurian, he's a marriage and family counselor. He is a New York Times bestselling author of 32 books. Another thing, he's 67 years old, and he has written 32 books. That's one book every 2 years since he was born. That's just...
I have a writing disorder.
I love it. You've got a writing disorder. I love it. Well, I want to dive into that. I need a little more of that in my life. And a leading expert. Michael is also a leading expert, as I just shared, on gender and brain research. Again, his work with boys, but also his work is focused on girls as well. And many of you out there, you've probably read The Wonder of Boys, and you've probably had that on your bookshelf as educators, those of you in the audience who are educators, for a while now. And again, Boys Rescue Plan is a perfect compendium to it. And anyhow, so Dr. Michael Gurian integrates neurobiology into education, business, and public policy. Michael has spoken at the UN, advised the White House, and briefed Congress on the boy crisis in America. His books, including The Wonder of Boys and Boys and Girls Learn Differently, have sparked national conversations. A dynamic speaker, he uses case studies and brain scans to help his audiences better understand and support gender development across all ages. His newest book is titled, third time, Boys, a Rescue Plan. And it was published last month and it is in wide circulation. Michael Gurian, welcome to Reach, Teach, Talk. We're thrilled to have you. And you're speaking to us. Are you in Spokane, Washington right now? Are you at home?
Thank you. Glad to be here. Yes, I'm in Spokane, Washington. That's where I live. Yep. I'm in my little home studio.
Fantastic. And you shared with me earlier, you're a man of ritual. You wake up at 4 a.m., right?
Yeah, right.
Every day, right? This is like midday for you. It's 10 o'clock for me. I still need my coffee. You've been up and running, and that's just awesome. I want to dive into this here. Your title of your recent book, Boys, a Rescue Plan. Why do boys need rescuing? And I'm just going to let you spin on this for a minute.
Yep. Oh, I hear you. So about 20 some years ago, I coined the phrase boy crisis, and actually there's a wonderful book by Warren Farrell, John Gray, called The Boy Crisis, 2019. This is I coined the phrase because boys have been in crisis for so long. And people, we have a whole kind of social system set up on a different frame. The frame that, let's say, it's set up on is that girls are always in crisis and they're actually victims of boys and men, right? That's the frame. And so it's very hard to get people to go, well, it's a both and, girls can have issues, women can have issues. We address those issues. And boys and men have been in crisis for quite a while. And so, obviously this one is specifically on boys. So when you look at every potential marker that you're going to look at, you're going to see where the male crisis is. We look at the mental health. So we have a whole section in the book on mental health, the male mental health crisis. so many depressed males who become violent. Of course, once males are depressed, they have a higher likelihood of becoming violent. We have anxiety, increase in anxiety. You mentioned COVID. Yeah, stuff's happening COVID and post-COVID too. Absolutely, from lockdown and from social isolation, which has affected the brain, and from overuse of digital. Too many young kids having to do 10 hours a day on digital, which is rewiring their brain toward more anxiety, more depression, et cetera. So we have all of that for both boys and girls. And then we have we have sort of the male side of it, which is more overdose, more suicide, um, uh, males, more violence and more incarceration, lower grades. So males get around 70% of the D's and F's in school and only 40% of the A's. The test scores for males are lower. Um, Girls' test scores over the last like 15 to 20 years keep going up. Male test scores keep going down. Um, and and then discipline referrals. So all the stuff happening with discipline referrals to the principal, vice president, school head, the 90% male, so getting in trouble, then dropping out, getting kicked out of school, expelled, suspended, starts all the way back in preschool. And so really you pick a marker. If you said, well, all right, what about this marker? If you came up with one, I would be able to respond and go, yep, well, here's the ways in which boys are in crisis. So a lot of boys obviously are doing well, as a lot of girls are doing well, right? So absolutely, there are different populations, and you can have a lot of males doing well, but you can also have males in crisis, right? Both are happening at the same time. And you can have a lot of females doing well, but you can say, my gosh, look at the increased depression and anxiety among our young girls, right? So a lot of girls and women are doing well, but you've got this crisis in female mental health, especially in the anxiety area for females. So it's all happening at once. And with boys, the crisis has reached, I think, a level finally where really people are paying attention. I mean, the last 2 to 3 years, I'm starting to see, more people paying attention. And now we are in, I think, an era where we can start addressing the crisis. So therefore, this is my last book in male development, Boys: A Rescue Plan. And I'm still writing, but I won't be writing another book in this. And so I put everything in here with my co-author, Sean Kuhlman. It's all in here: the mental health crisis, the educational crisis, the relational crisis, et cetera.
Thank you. And wow. And by the way, the structure of Boys: A Rescue Plan is so fantastic, I think, because the chapters are specific to the relational, schools, academics, the suicide epidemic, depression, what it looks like, how it manifests, all of that. Like it's a book that you can really kind of take apart and just go chapter by chapter in order or not. You write part of it,
Right.
Sean writes part of it. You complement each other just beautifully, and I just really think that it should be actually on the bookshelf in the vice principal's offices all over the country, just right next to the Wonder of Boys, frankly, because it is that user friendly and also that current on the data. I want to actually, and boy, that's quite an intro. I'm still kind of processing all the different kind of metrics where boys and girls are struggling today, and I'm just thinking about how COVID kind of, in a sense, perhaps gave us the impetus to be able to speak about these topics with much more latitude and much more kind of social understanding, in a sense. So when we talk about depression, how does depression present with boys? I found when I was reading your book, both books actually, Wonder, but particularly this one, Rescue Plan, the way you describe how depression presents in boys is really eye-opening, because for many of us, we might not actually be able to pinpoint, oh, this is depressed behavior. We think one way about what depression presents, but really with boys, it could be present very differently and surprisingly. So can you talk a bit about your experience and how depression manifests?
Yep. Yeah. So male type depression and female type depression are not exactly the same thing. And in order to talk about them, of course, we have to, for folks who don't know, the male brain and the female brain are set up differently, right? And my work is brain scan based. So everything's based on brain scans, on looking at brain scans and seeing how differently starting in utero, male and female brains develop. And so therefore we need to, I believe, talk about female type depression and male type depression. So overt depression and covert depression. So female type depression tends to be, and this is a pattern. There are going to be exceptions to everything, but this is a pattern. It tends to present to us in the ways that we're more used to depression presenting. So I'm sad. I can talk about the fact that I'm sad because I'm sad, and that's more female type depression. And so maybe more crying behavior, which will be another indication that I am sad, that there's something going on for me. And so however people think of depression presenting along those lines is more female type depression, more of what we call overt depression. It's overt. I can see one, especially if you tell me I'm sad, I can see it and go, oh my gosh, yes, you have been sad for the last month or two or three. That's overt. To covert depression is it's hidden, right? So it usually hides behind, and this is more males. By the way, females can have covert depression. These things can cross over, but these are patterns, and they actually come in on our genes. They come in on XXXY, right? The way our brains are set up come in on our genetics. So for males, they often hide depression behind anger because generally these guys don't know they're depressed, right? And it's not that they don't have the language for it. Their brains are not processing in the same way that the female brain does. So they will be angry. And a parent might say, he wasn't angry before, but he's like the last 2 months been really, really angry. What's that about? Well, there could be a reason. He could have just been abused. And now he's having a trauma response. Well, that's still going to be a depression response. He's still going to be depressed, even if he has just been traumatized. And similarly, you mentioned the COVID. Similarly, the social isolation, that's a double whammy for these kids. Not only were they socially isolated, which has caused more depression and anxiety, but their increase in digital is actually a form of social isolation. So it's doubling down on their relational isolation, even though they're texting back and forth and they're playing interactive video games and they are still isolated because the pheromones of relationship, of being in proximal relationship, right? I'm with you, I'm giving you a hug, or I'm chatting with you, not in a screen, but in real life, that creates proximal relationship, which creates proximal biochemistry, that's shared. Well, so even the increase in digital has caused more isolation. The more isolation, the more the brain moves toward depression and or anxiety. So these guys have had a doubling down on what would create depression for them, and then they have whatever their own genetics, and then they have whatever is going on, and they're depressed, but they don't know it. So what they do is they get angry, and that's one way in which we see they're depressed. They also can become more violent. Male depression often hides behind violence, and again, they don't know they're depressed. So we as a system have to understand male type depression and covert depression. They will probably start using drugs. Something's going to happen if they've got addiction genetics, which is 1 in 4, right? Kids, that'll probably get triggered from the depression. And so now they're starting to use drugs. Well, it's hiding behind the drug use, because the drug use, of course, they take substances that give them the dopamine rush. So we think they're not depressed because they're kind of happy, right? They're doing marijuana or whatever they're doing. Well, they're probably not everyone using marijuana is depressed, but if we're looking for where does covert depression hide, it hides behind drug use, alcohol use, especially among adolescents. So they're going to be doing these other things, and we're going to have to go, oh, I wonder if you're depressed.
So what I'm hearing you say is it's kind of a rallying cry for those of us who work with boys or who have boys in our homes or our schools to really lean in more and to really and not pathologize every boy that's walking around maybe feeling kind of angry or looking angry, but look for trends. Is that what you suggest?
Yeah.
Like look for repeated anger patterns.
Yeah. Well, for instance, a guy can hit puberty, and as a girl can, and their hormones are so active that actually, they can become moody and they become angry.
There's something that I'm also really curious about because you talk about this in Boys: A Rescue Plan is if we could just go a little bit deeper into the chemistry of it, because the way it presents, as you just reviewed, is actually it can present in anger, it can present in extreme moodiness and violence. What's the connection between testosterone and depression?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I bet people will grab this right away. They'll think about it when we think, okay, the male type depression, you get more anger, you could get more violence, you could even get more high risk or addictive behavior. Well, if you think about what testosterone is, right? This is a chemical. Males have 10 to 20 times the amount that females have in their bloodstream, therefore in their brain. So, this is a chemical. It's a sex chemical, yes. But in young people, it's more of an aggression chemical, and in all of us, it's more of an aggression chemical. So, you got 10 to 20 times this amount, then you're going to maybe respond to the world and to what's going on in yourself differently than if you're female. And then you add stress in. So the more stress that a guy gets under, the more his cortisol level goes up. And he can have an external stressor like trauma. He could have an internal stressor like depression coming. And male testosterone goes up. So then you get more aggression chemical, right? The more you get your cortisol up, the trauma chemical, the stress chemical, you get more testosterone. And an interesting difference and let me finish the thought, then I'll go to this difference. Then you start thinking about anger. Okay, well, anger is going to could come along with more testosterone, right? It's an aggression chemical. And then, you look at violence. Well, violence and aggression are not the same thing, right? Aggression is actually a healthy thing. Generally, violence is a dangerous, unhealthy thing. But still, it's possible that you get more violence with just over too much testosterone. And then even the addictive behavior and the high risk quality of the addictive behavior, more testosterone. So testosterone's in that mix. And the insight maybe for people is that the more stress guys get under, the more their testosterone is potentially going to go up. But another thing about testosterone is that now, 30 years later, our males have about 30% less testosterone in their system. And lower testosterone is another comorbid factor for male depression. People will say, well, wait a minute, if your testosterone is really, really high and it might cause more aggression, then wouldn't it be better if your testosterone is lower? Because if your testosterone is lower, well, then you won't be as aggressive. Okay, that's what people have said. Could work in a particular case. But when it comes to depression, our bloodstreams are set up for a mean level of testosterone. So we need to have, as males, the testosterone that we need to have. And because of all the neurochemical issues we have with endocrine disruptors in food and in fertilizer and all the environmental neurotoxins that are affecting the amount of testosterone in male bloodstreams, we're actually getting an opposite issue, which is we're getting too low testosterone. And when male testosterone is too low, you can have more depression. So you can get more male depression that connects with high testosterone, but you can also get more male depression with too low a testosterone. And it's that one that is probably the most important factor in a very important factor in, when we put it together with these other things like too much digital and too much social isolation, too few relationships. You put all this together with too little testosterone, another reason you're going to get more male type depression.
Fascinating. So now I'm viewing testosterone levels through a band lens, right? Too high, right. It's kind of a Goldilocks, right? Too high or too low. Those are warning signs. Those are contributors to what visibly presents as withdrawal or aggression, right? Or violence, rather. By the way, let's break this down too. Aggression versus violence.
Yeah.
A lot of times teachers would say, oh my God, he's being so aggressive. But aggression, you were just saying, is not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's healthy. It's healthy. I mean, when women are aggressive, that's healthy. Aggression is, I'm trying to challenge you. if I'm aggressive, I'm challenging you. Okay, well, that's healthy. I mean, that builds resilience, right? I challenge you, you respond. I'm helping you to become more resilient. I'm challenging the universe by building a building in like aggression is going to be required as LA rebuilds from the fires. That's aggression. I'm rebuilding this neighborhood. That's aggression. Anything where we're challenging is aggression, and that is healthy. Violence is I'm trying to destroy you. So I'm either trying to destroy you by shooting you, or by going to war and trying to destroy you. That's obviously violence. Or I'm trying to destroy your core self. So bullying, it goes beyond aggression and becomes violence because the bully is trying to destroy the core self of the victim, right? So I'm trying to destroy your core self. I'm violent toward you. If all I'm doing is challenging you, I'm aggressive, and that's not violent, and that's not dangerous. It's in fact healthy, and it's one of the reasons that, as you know from my all of my books, all talk about aggression nurturance and how healthy it is, and that the way males nurture, and fathers tend to do it too more than mothers, is to use aggression nurturance. We nurture through aggression. We throw these kids up in the air really high. Okay, that's aggressive, but that rough and tumble play actually builds brain centers. So aggression nurturance is a great way to nurture. And direct empathy nurturance is a great way to nurture. Males tend more toward paternal nurturance, which is more aggression nurturance. Females tend more toward maternal nurturance, which is more what we call direct empathy nurturance. They're both great. They're both needed. And they both build resilience in kids. They both help children to grow up well. So aggression is healthy. Violence is unhealthy.
I'm thinking about the teachers who I work with who talk about the oppositional defiance in the classroom. Like they may say like, oh, so and so is, just oppositional, like sitting in the back row with the arms crossed, or if somebody presented a statement that was completely oppositional to what I was teaching. This is such a great lane to get into with teachers, just to get them to think like maybe think together like how much of this is oppositional and about confrontation versus aggression. Like how much of, because a healthy classroom, I'm thinking about high school kids, is a grappling classroom where disagreement happens, right? And to not be to be able to embrace that in a classroom, I'm thinking relationally, is a very good thing, but it does require some discernment, right? Like just some like, okay, is it aggression that this student is displaying as he's grappling, or is it actually like he wants to smother me out, as a teacher or whatever?
Yeah, well put. Well, the interesting thing is that even that kind of oppositional defiant is a very real thing, but it's also a diagnosis. Like things just kind of happen. Like teachers may not be briefed in or may not actually know much about attachment disorders and attachment theory, and they'll use the term because this becomes popular, oppositional defiant. Well, it's a specific thing. Is the kid oppositional and defiant? Yes. Does he have the brain disorder or the attachment disorder? He might not. But okay, let's get to the behavior. So yes, interestingly, this kind of behavior goes down in classrooms when the classrooms are set up for the male brain. What we mean there is as the classrooms become environments where the teachers they've been trained in male-female brain difference. They've been trained in how boys and girls learn differently, how boys and girls grow differently, right? They've gotten the training in it. So what they do is they switch their system around so that now it's going to help both boys and girls. And previously, their system mainly helped girls. And it lost, like in a classroom of 26, 13 boys, 13 girls, it was losing like 4 or 5 boys, especially those ones who become oppositional and defiant. It was losing them. But the system switches, and now it can take care of all 26 kids. And so now those guys are engaged, right? Like there's a lot of movement in the classroom now. There are brain breaks in the classroom. There's more use of spatial mechanicals. And so more of the male brain is getting used rather than just the reliance on words and, lecture and sitting. All of this changes the classroom management, right? And so it changes what's going on in the classroom. And now a lot of these guys, they don't act out as much. They don't cross their arms as much. They don't frown as much. They don't, the ones who have a behavioral disorder, So maybe the 1 out of the 26, they're going to probably still have that, you know. But these other guys that teacher was losing, the teacher probably won't lose. So we have to look at it, sort of from both perspectives. Some kids do have oppositional defiant disorder. They do have a behavioral disorder, and what I'm talking about may not help them. They're going to probably need an IEP, and they're going to need extra help. But a lot of what that teacher is seeing is going to go away when the classroom is set up. And it'll be training that's more than, oh, I'm going to use this one strategy. It's going to be deeper than that. It's the teacher's going to get training in understanding the male brain and understanding how the male brain is a mismatch with this classroom, or this school, the way the school is set up or the classroom is set up. And that training leads to not only the use of strategies that will work with these guys, but it also leads to kind of a tectonic shift in the teacher's vision. And she starts seeing males differently, not as the problem, and that helps a lot. It helps a lot relationally, because now the kids are going to trust the teacher more. So relationally, right, she or he is going to have a better relationship with these kids, and they're going to not want to oppose her as much and be as defiant with her, because the kids feel respected by the teacher. That alters the relationship. Then the kids will respect the teacher more.
Yep, the cat and mouse game gets reduced.
Right.
And I'm thinking about how this presents like opportunities for schools to really capitalize on the 13 and 13, the co-ed schools, right? The balanced classroom, gender-wise, biological sex-wise, and how we can help through understanding about how boys tick and how boys flourish, how we can incorporate that into our classroom practices. And I guess I want to take this a step further and ask you, Mike, what would you look for if you were to build a school yourself? What would be Dr. Michael Gurian's top 5 elements toward helping boys and girls, both as corollary, but maybe also directly, in this day and age? What would like the top 3 to 5 essential components to a flourishing school look like to you that we could incorporate even to our existing schools, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's pick an age group, because that's going to affect the answer.
High school.
Middle school?
High
Or
school.
what?
Let's do high school. Yep.
Okay, so in a high school, here are a number of elements. The environment's probably already set up. If we could set up the environment, if we were building it from scratch, I'm going to give some environmental things. It may already be set up, so these may not work. More space, like classrooms that have more space. So the male brain tends to use up more physical space. And there are various reasons, cerebellum involvement, all sorts of reasons I could give for why males tend to want to take up more space. And as they're taking up more space, part of what they're trying to do is relate. Like they're trying to bond with and relate to others. So they're trying to do group work. Well, that needs more space. And then in high school, group work's really, really good. Projects, group projects. So one is going to be look at the environment and, let's see if there's more space. And in that space, let's make sure the chairs all move around, because we're not really going to want chairs in rows. That's not really good teaching, even though sometimes you have to revert to it. So more space, everything's movable. So these are all environmental. One of the 5 is environmental. You're going to have different kinds of like different sorts of desks that are available. So some people can stand, and all of these things, by the way, are going to be good for the girls. So there's nothing here that's bad for girls, right? Really, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Girls could take advantage of all these environmental factors too, and it would only enhance if they want to. They just won't tend to want to as much. Their brains are set up differently. So look at the environment. That's going to be, number one. There's going to be a lot of space outdoors for running around, et cetera, tracks and all that. The second thing is going to be teacher training. So absolutely, every teacher is going to need to do boys and girls learn differently training. And here's why, and that's going to be more important than the curricula that are selected, right? Because the curricula are going to get selected. The math people are going to select the math curriculum. The language arts are going to select the language arts. So they're going to select that, and they're going to select that based on their own professional assessment of what they want to teach. And we shouldn't take that away from them. They're smart people. They know what they want to teach. So the issue is not going to be curriculum. It's going to be, are they trained to teach boys and girls brains? And by the way, if they're trained to teach boys and girls brains, they will be trained to teach trans, gender nonconforming, everybody, the whole spectrum.
This is what the Gurian Institute does. Your
Right.
institute you founded works with schools in creating culture that is, best practices regarding boys and girls learning.
Boy
right?
friendly and girl friendly. Yep. And it
Awesome.
therefore
I didn't cut you off,
includes
but
the
I
whole
just wanted
spectrum.
I want
Yeah.
to plug this because this is huge what you've also set up. I didn't mention this in the intro. So,
Yeah.
Gurian Institute.
Yeah, we've been for about 30 years doing this community by community, school by school, district by district, as we're asked. And Boys a Rescue Plan actually features a lot of that success data, and then our website has it too. So this is how we know that this is an important element, because the systems where everyone gets trained in, and the whole system, and as you say, culture shifts to understand how boys and girls learn differently, and then practice, the useful strategies. And they see the science base of it, because I and my team, we're always showing them scans of the brain. So, very science-based. It's not like, oh, this is a new opinion that someone has, it's very science-based. And yeah, then that's the second major element, because as they
Teacher training.
get the training and understand how boys and girls learn differently, then they will adapt whatever curriculum that individual selected, or the various curricula that were selected by the district. That's going to get adapted hands-on. The third thing is going to be the culture and climate, and that's going to be the relationship piece, the relationality. So everyone in that system is going to get training in how males bond, females bond, girls and boys, and it's going to include the whole spectrum. And then they're going to know as adults how to maximize how the kids work relationally. And so they're going to be able to relate, right, as adults to these kids. And I think everyone listening to this will intuit that sometimes you bond with males differently than you bond with females. Sometimes males are doing stuff with you as an adult to try to bond with you that you as an adult think is not bonding, right? That we think as adults is bad. We got to pathologize that. Like guys one-upping each other.
I was just thinking that one-upping.
Oh yeah,
Totally.
absolutely normal way that guys bond.
Yeah, absolutely.
And girls can become nasty to each other and all that, but we all know that this is somewhat different than that. They're not trying to one-up you because they disrespect you, even though they're dissing you. They're one-upping you because they actually respect you, and they're challenging you, and they want you to challenge them back. And as we challenge each other, we develop a bond, and it's a bond of mutual respect. But we do it by putting each other through these paces, and it's a form of aggression nurturance. Well, we want to really learn about this as adults so that we can bond with them as guys. And the whole bonding, we're going to use our words, right? That's a thing that's very big in education. Use your words. And so guys will do things that are actually bonding, where they're trying to respect, and the teacher will go, no, use your words. Like maybe the guy is bumping someone, and it's like, oh, stop that. Use your words. Well, okay, words are great. I'm a therapist, right? We're all in the education field. We love words. But what I'm getting at here is that we got to understand aggression nurturance, paternal nurturance, male bonding. We got to understand all that so that the culture and climate accepts and in fact maximizes the way males bond, which will ultimately help them learn. So the behavioral relational part of culture and climate is also going to be very, very important. And I think I've talked enough. Those are three.
You have not talked enough.
5, but those are three.
I love it. Those three. So I love it. You've got space, and we've got teacher training, and we've got a culture and climate that's focused on bonding, the way boys bond, the way girls bond, recognizing that it's different for both. I want to get back to space for a moment, because I always loop time and space together, right? And I wonder if there's anything you might connect with this. Like, you were focused on space in terms of the physical space of the classroom and of the school and the hallways, breezeways, letting room to roam. Yet, what about time? Is there anything you would say about, like, if you were to structure also, one of the things I love is looking at every school I work with, I look at their daily schedule and I love looking at how time is allocated. That says a lot to me about school culture. Is there anything you would say about, like, how do you think schools could better use the school day, the time in the school day to help boys?
Yeah, you've made a great distinction. I always put both space and time under the environment, and you're right that we need to look at them separately. So space is one thing, time is another. If we're, well, especially because you said high school, then of course we want to look at when they're waking up in the morning, when we're forcing them to wake up in the morning, because the adolescent brain, of course, is waking up later.
Yes.
And that's kind of what it needs. So
You're in favor of a later school start for high school kids?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And some of the schools are now doing that. So that's great. They're except for the ones who have to get up really early for sports or for band practice or something. It's like, okay, you can get up later and we're going to start the school day at 9 instead of 8:30, or, not 8:30 instead of 8, where based on where it was. And that's because of the circadian rhythm and when the brain's going to wake up. Another use of time is make sure they're doing something physical in the first period. So, that is also going to get their brains to wake up, and then they're going to be able to learn better. If first period is, let's say, language arts, which, I'm a writer, I love language arts, but if language arts is first period at 8:30, some of those brains are just not awake yet. I would rather have that be maybe homeroom, in which they're doing all sorts of physical strategies, or they get to walk around for like peripatetic, where they're learning peripatetically, Socratically, walking around, anything like that, where they're getting more physical movement, because that gets more of the cerebellum involved, which then sends signaling up throughout the brain. And then by the time they get to second period, okay, now language arts, now math. So look at that. Another thing having to do with time is cell phones and technologies. We want to look at, we definitely want to have no cell phone use, right, during the day. We got to get them off the screens as much as possible. And then, maybe at lunch, they get to take their cell phone out. I would say don't need them at all, but generally with the schools who are doing this, we'll let them have it at lunch. But not during recess, or not during any of the class periods, just at lunch. So no cell phone. So time now becomes different because they don't immediately go to their screen. Then they actually have to relate more with the other people around them, do more group work to problem solve, right? So there's more relationality, et cetera. Because we've got to remember that the screen is cutting off relationship, even though we're going on the internet. I'm a child going on the internet to do research. I'm supposedly relating to the people whose research I'm reading, but no, I'm really not. That's not really relational. It's information gathering, but not relational. So as we get off of screens as much as possible during the school day, I mean, in high school, you're going to be on screen some of it. There's no doubt, because you're going to have to do research. So you're going to go on the internet, but otherwise don't need to be using them. Don't need to be using iPads. iPads are almost like a cell phone, so because they're connected to the internet. So we're getting it back to relationality and learning through relationship, which is where so much learning occurs. So that would be another thing I would suggest, is just really watch the screens.
God, I appreciate that. And you mentioned earlier in this episode about it's a 10-hour average right now. We're up to 10 hours of screen time a day.
Right, which is dangerous to the brain.
I mean, and a lot of that is in school too, right? So it's like, schools can really kind of follow the whole Jonathan Haidt, Anxious Generation, right? It kind of
great book. Yep,
great book, and he's got his strategies as well, and just pick and choose what works best for you as a school leader, or as a parent, or a coach, or anybody who works with kids, and in this case, in with boys. We're gonna have to wrap this up, but I want to share that there was something serendipitous last night, and it's just been transcending in my mind this whole time. The Apple TV show called Shrinking.
I love that show.
Do you? I was going to ask you offline.
I love it. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's yeah. but where I'm going with this is last night was the episode which I think captures this entire episode, our entire episode, which is there's a scene at the end where Jason Segel's character, he's the junior psychologist under Harrison Ford's tutelage, and he's going through a crisis. And the last bit of this episode was him, and he's depressed. And I now know he was depressed because of this episode, Mike, our conversation, because he visibly is withdrawn. He's got all these friends now, this neighborhood community, and all this, and he knows he's depressed. He said so to himself, through whatever reasons. And instead of going to his friends, he's seen walking the streets of Pasadena. He's by himself. He's drinking. He might be doing some drugs. He's blurry. He's scattered. He is on his own. He's in the middle of an intersection of cars. He doesn't care if a car hits him or not. He's not connecting with anybody, and he is going inside, deep, deep within. So that has been just, and that is so indicative of what you have shared with us today about the way that depression presents. I wasn't sure that so much of our conversation today would focus on this, Mike, but I'm so glad it did, because COVID really exposed the isolation and the effect of isolation on all of our kids and all of ourselves. 9 times out of 10, I would ask girls at this. I was at the time I was at a girls' school. And I would ask these girls, like, what are your brothers doing, you know? And to a person, they'd roll their eyes and be like, I have no idea. He's up in his bedroom, door shut, like ordering DoorDash and like, on the screens. He's alone, right? And this withdrawal. So how schools can become centers of relational connectivity, knowing now what you've shared with us about the impact of true, it was parasympathetic interaction where we're sharing space together, the body language, the energy, the flow, the neural connections, the mirror brains, all that, and how schools can design themselves to truly honor that, as opposed to before COVID, where it was like, okay, and now it's like, okay, yeah, okay, yes, this is essential. We know this now, and to teach our, have teacher training based on this, to have our environments, physical space, school schedules, time, have the culture focused on how can we capitalize on rapport, on what you say, on bonding, teacher student, student, boy girl, girl boy, trans, non-binary, binary, cisgender. How can we get everybody to really put front and center the importance of connection? So that's my last words. I want to leave it with you. And God, we could talk about so many other topics related to this, and this has gone by so fast. But thank you for being on with us. And please,
sure.
Last word, Dr. Michael Gurian.
Oh gosh, well, you said it so well. I think first of all, it was an honor to be on. So thank you, and just call me anytime. I'll come back. There's so much to talk about. You're a great interviewer. So you're right to connect it all to relationality, because in a sense, everything is about relationships, right? I mean, in a sense, and in a school environment, the child who relates well to the teacher learns from the teacher, right? If the teacher has a good relationship with the child, if the counselor, if the principal, if the relationships are good, the child's more likely to learn from this person, right? Because there's a kind of inchoate, parasympathetic, as you said, trust that the child has for that adult, and so going to learn more from that adult. So I think that's, as you're saying, that's sort of the jumping off point, and for everyone. And my hope would be that everyone will look at this kind of stuff and go, okay, well, not only is this sort of training and this understanding, male, female, brain difference training and all of that, not only is it going to help me, understand how to teach math better, let's say, to boys and girls, but it's also going to help me to relate to them. And if I can relate to them as an adult in a way that fits who they are, then they're not only going to learn from me, but I also think, to your point about withdrawal, maybe they're going to be less likely to withdraw from me, because they're getting that parasympathetic dopamine rush of the relationship with me, because they like me, they respect me, they like me, I like them, I respect them, right? There's a bond. And so maybe they won't withdraw as much. And that was wise what those girls were saying to you about the boys. I mean, we do have a lot of boys, and unfortunately their parents don't realize that they as parents can intervene on this, who just go into their rooms and lock themselves in their rooms, and they are depressed. I mean, they're doing that Anyone who is socially isolating is either, low, middle, or high grade depressed. So, yeah, those guys are probably depressed if they're socially isolating. And, even the parents have to be educated to go, no, wait a minute. Even though he's on the screen, he's still isolated. He's still depressed. He should not lock that door. That door should always be open. You should be calling him to meals. He needs to eat meals with you, et cetera, because we want to have him not be socially isolated. Well, sometimes a teacher becomes like a mentor to this guy. And that teacher is actually helping him to be less depressed because he comes to the teacher for help with things, for wisdom. So that bond is a bond that not only helps the learning process and the whole environment, but that bond may save a life. I mean, you never know. It may save a life.
That bond may save a life. And for teachers out there listening, this is I know. I mean, this is a 30-person, 35-person class that you're teaching. Like it's not the expectation that you're going to bond with every kid and you're going to have this relationship. But if it's one kid, if it's just a handful of kids, but one kid whose life you may be saving by seeing them, by connecting with them, and then that's all the difference in the world. And I've talked in the past about letting the curriculum serve the teaching, and now I'm thinking let the content serve the connection. And how can you as a teacher just allow that to happen? Just give permission for the content to serve the connection, knowing that connection is central to what our kids, this generation, needs more than ever. Because we're fighting the device, we're fighting the isolation. That's not going away. And how can we best intervene and create those human-to-human relationships that are so healing and healthy? Thank you, Dr. Michael Gurian. Your book, once again, boys, A Rescue Plan, book number 28. I also got to just give a real shout out to your creative writing as well. And it's beautiful. And we won't get into it now, but I know that you've written some novels. I know you've written some beautiful, beautiful essays that are totally creative and beautiful in their own humanistic way and from your heart in a way that just makes you even more fascinating. You've got you're the scientist, you're the researcher, you're the analytical, and you're also the creative and the very right-brained. You're a beautiful writer and just a beautiful person to talk with about the human condition, in this case, focusing on boys today. So thank you once again, Dr. Michael Gurian, the Gurian Institute, all his information up here on the website here, and just please click on it and share this with your friends. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Reach Teach Talk with Nat Damon. If you'd like to recommend a guest for a future episode, you can send your suggestion or questions to nat@reachacademics.com.